Three, two, one. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day podcast, along with Packers Wire. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And joining me once again is the one and only Paul Bretl. You can follow him on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. Paul, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Andy. Looking forward to talking Packers after a big win, big-time win on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I'm still very giddy as well. That's kind of the game that I've been waiting for and just wanting to see, out of this team. And it's one of those things that prior to the season, I said at some point they're going to get a couple wins or a win against a team that people weren't expecting. I said there's probably going to be a couple of the reverse along the way where they have a devastating loss against some team that they weren't expected to lose to. I think we've seen a little bit of both of those things now, but that was like the one where you really felt, all right, this is a good team on the road, national audience, and you go back and rewatch the game. There's no flukiness here. There's nothing that would have said like, oh, if the ball bounces the other way, Detroit wins the season. No, it's the other way. If a ball bounces the other way a couple of times, like Green Bay wins this like 43-14. So I'm still super pumped about just the way that they played. And really over the last month, just the improvement that they've shown overall.
Yeah, we're finally seeing that growth, that progress that we've all been waiting for. And one just quick thing I'll say about that game, that obviously Jordan Love's performance, but beyond just the numbers and what we saw, what was truly encouraging for me was that he did it without a run game to lean on. Like we talked about it. I know many did leading up to that game. Like attacking the Lions on the ground to begin with is not going to be the best strategy, but Packers haven't been a good rushing offense, shorthanded at the running back position. Matt LaFleur said, we all kind of had the idea they were going to have to go into that game throwing the ball. I imagine the Detroit Lions knew that they were going to come into that game throwing the ball. And still, Jordan Love, his group of young receivers were still able to put up the numbers that they did, find the success that they did when, to a degree, right out the gate, being one-dimensional. And not that long ago, a few weeks ago, like that's something that would have just absolutely destroyed this offense.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. It's the lack of a running game, the defense that has really, kind of kept teams in games, or that just the fact that in part due to its own ineptitude is a strong word at times, but its own mistakes has, allowed the other teams to constantly be ahead. Like, it's just like, this is a team that's playing from behind, can't run the ball, and is putting a ton on Jordan Love in his very first season, and he's responding. It is hard not to get excited about thinking of, man, imagine if they had a running game. Imagine if they had a healthy David Bakhtiari or just a couple of offensive linemen that were a step above the John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, Rasheed Walker trio. Imagine if they had a defense that was, legitimate top 5, top 8 defense. And nothing's ever going to be perfect in the NFL. You're always going to have some things that you wish were a little bit better. That's just the nature of the game. But man, with just a couple of tweaks here and there. And we were just wondering, Paul, earlier in the season of like, man, imagine if the wide receivers and the tight ends and the quarterback get on the same page. Right. Now we're starting to see some of that, and it looks pretty freaking good.
Yeah, it's a lot of the ideas, the visions that we saw in pieces during training camp during the summer are now finally starting to take place on Sundays.
Super, super exciting. We'll get to a little bit more Jordan Love in just a bit, but I wanted to go over kind of some transactions first. Nothing crazy that happened on Tuesday. Packers signed tight end Joel Wilson, who will go on the practice squad. They released Anthony Johnson, not to be confused with Anthony Johnson Jr., which apparently really freaked out and panicked some people online, I saw. So Anthony Johnson Jr., the safety, still well intact on the Packers defense, no concerns whatsoever. They did have a corner named Anthony Johnson, who is also a rookie in the defensive backfield, is not a junior as far as I know, and Anthony Johnson Jr., just an Anthony Johnson. He is gone from the Packers practice squad. In the meantime, Dallin Leavitt, who they released last week, is now on the Broncos practice squad. For anyone, for some reason, that was holding out hope that Dallin Leavitt was going to come back in some capacity, that ship has sailed. He is now a Denver Bronco on their practice squad. Any thoughts on the signings, releases, or Dallin Leavitt's journey to the Broncos?
I was just going to say, as I was crafting that tweet to send out that Anthony Johnson was released, I was very careful. I made sure I put practice squad in all caps. I put cornerback just to try to limit any sort of confusion that was out there. But, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know really anything about Joel Wilson. What I will say is that the addition of a tight end was very much needed. They had the 2 practice squad openings and still do after letting go of Anthony Johnson. But, obviously, Luke Musgrave's on IR. Matt LaFleur was very non-committal about if he'll even return at any point this season. They got to get kind of on the other side of these next few weeks before even determining if that's a possibility. So with him on IR, Josiah DeGuara didn't practice on Monday after missing Thursday's game. Like, they only have 2 healthy tight ends on the 53. They don't have any tight ends up until today on the practice squad, just Henry Pearson, a fullback who primarily played special teams on Thursday. So obviously an addition at this position had to be made. What I will say, just kind of briefly looking at Wilson, because he's a undrafted rookie this past spring out of Central Michigan. He was a pretty key contributor to their passing game. Almost 50% of his snaps last season came from the slot, had 105 targets over 2 seasons. I looked up Lance Zierlein of NFL.com, just kind of his quick snippet draft profile, called him a crafty runner, said that his run blocking is an area that he can improve on, though.
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be an interesting pickup. And if he all of a sudden gets added to the 53 at some point, I'm sure both you and I and a lot of other people will be doing a deeper dive on him at some point. But interesting practice squad pickup for the time being at a position where they just needed a couple bodies. Green Bay still has a couple openings on their active roster. They have not done anything with Bo Melton or James Robinson as of yet. So those will be some interesting things to keep an eye on from a practice squad standpoint. If they bring either of them back, with Anthony Johnson gone on the practice squad, I believe they still have some openings there too. It was weird on Monday as I was at, and everyone else was at practice I was covering. And it was just like, you look at the running back room and it's Patrick Taylor and Ellis Merriweather, 2 guys that were literally not on the roster a couple weeks ago, which is just crazy to think about. So I'm assuming they feel probably good if at least one of the 2 between Jones and Dillon, if not both, might be back this week, which gives them a little bit more confidence there. But just an interesting setup to the roster with some of those rooms being rather empty at the moment.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's go back to those young wide receivers for just a moment, because again, we saw a little bit more proof of concept as of late with some of these wideouts and certainly the tight ends. Still a bummer that Luke Musgrave had the injury and we're not being able to see him kind of continue the progress that he was already making, but he'll be in a good spot going into next year, even if he can't return at some point this year, which we don't know if that's going to be the case or not yet. I was looking at a couple of receivers, specifically Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. Again, these are just my individual grades. It's not the be all end all ever, but Christian Watson, remember, he missed the first 3 weeks, weeks 4 through 8, negative 1.3 grade, weeks 9 through 12, plus 1.15. So basically just a complete reversal for Christian Watson, and obviously a big breakout this past week. Jaden Reed, weeks 1 through 9, obviously the majority of the season, plus 0.2 grade. So we just kind of like solid, steady. Weeks 10 through 12, plus 2.05. So took a huge step in the right direction, at least again per my grading scale. But I don't think anyone needs my grading scale to pass the eye test with some of these young wide receivers and just see, okay, things are starting to click a little bit more than they were earlier in the season.
Yeah, I wrote about this over at Packers Wire because it was about a month ago now. It was before the Rams game. So Packers are in the midst of that 4-game losing streak, and Jason Vrabel, the wide receivers coach, is at the podium speaking with us, and he's talking about how just encouraged he is. And again, this is in the midst of that 4-game losing streak where the receivers drop balls, failure in contested catches, wrong routes, all that stuff is full blown. It's happening. And he's sitting up there telling us about how encouraged he is, how they're on the right trajectory, how these are some of the best practices that he's been a part of. And he did not just specify this season. He means with the Green Bay Packers. And so you're taking that in, again, the framework of where we are in the season, and definitely feels like coach speak. But now, a month later, we're seeing come to fruition on Sundays what Vrabel was seeing on the practice field. And he, again, was speaking with us as part of his rotation on this past Monday. And when specifying on what gave him that confidence, obviously the results weren't there. We were seeing that on Sundays prior to that, but everything in practice, they were playing hard, they were competing, they were winning their one-on-ones. He said the balls weren't touching the ground, like all those parts of the process that you want to check the box, the receivers were doing that. And so seeing that daily, he knew it was just a matter of time before we're going to start seeing that translate to the football field on Sundays. And I think along with that growth, I think a good example of that is Christian Watson's touchdown against the Chargers. That was that play that John Dunn, the tight ends coach, kind of drew up on the fly based on what the Chargers had shown the Packers previously in that drive. And Adam Stenavich, prior to the Lions game last week, he was very candid in saying, I don't know if that's something we can do even 2 or 3 weeks ago. Like that in itself is just a prime example of the growth, basically saying, here's a concept we've kind of worked on, throughout the season. We're going to have you do this, you do that, and then we're going to apply it. Everybody good? Gave them the thumbs up. They went out and ran it. They executed it well. Like just that time frame of 2 to 3 weeks being the difference between we can do this now and we can't. And that those struggles with adjustments early on in the season. I know Jordan Love had talked about that, how when defenses throw an unscouted look at the receivers, and this was back in weeks 3 and 4 when he was talking about this, how a little bit of deer in the headlights from them. I mean, if you haven't seen something, you haven't seen something, and how you react to it, you kind of got to figure it out on the fly. And I think a good example of that was that Denver game, because that was coming out of the bye. Matt LaFleur talked about, here's what Denver's put on film in terms of the Packers opening script. Here's what they've put on film for the first 5 weeks of the season. Here's how we're going to attack it. Denver comes out in something completely different. And being a young team, not able at that stage of the season to make these grand adjustments on the fly, they didn't really have a counter to it. And that's something that we've seen throughout the early portions of the season. So we're seeing the results of it all. Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, just the numbers that they're putting up in your grades, as you mentioned. But to me, that touchdown pass against the Chargers from Love to Watson is a prime example of the growth, the development, how are more comfortable with the looks defenses are throwing at them. Vrabel talked about their understanding in terms of how they have to prepare each week to compete. And he also had one other story that I really liked. He mentioned how the relationship that Jordan Love has established with them, how he's the first person there when there's a mistake that's made to put his arm around him and say, hold your head up. The ball's coming back your direction. I can't have you, blinking. I can't have you looking down. You got to be ready. I'm coming back to you, and being that confidence for him. And then Vrabel added, I think it was just this past week in the Lions game, where Love was getting after the receivers. And he was talking about that in a positive way in terms of that leadership, that confidence that he has in them and wanting them to execute the route as they should. And again, that was 100% a positive comment on Vrabel's part. But Love with how he's approached things, the equity that he's built up with an individual. When you have a relationship with someone, you can be a little more tough on them in those situations. And it absolutely feels like Love is, finding his voice to a degree in terms of that leadership role, being that guy who's commanding, understanding and helping when the play isn't executed correctly, but getting on them now as well, which for how Vrabel described it, was not something that was happening early on in the season either.
Yeah, it's really fun to see all these improvements all over the place. I want to point to a couple other plays as well, really quick. Just the two Christian Watson plays, or two plays that involve Christian Watson. The first one was the opening play where they throw deep to him down the field. It's not an A+ perfect ball. Christian goes up and gets it anyway and makes the big completion. The other one is the one where, from all accounts, and it's very easy to tell pretty much on tape too, that Christian runs the wrong route on the touchdown to Jaden Reed, but they get the touchdown anyway. One of the things that I'm a pretty big believer in, and Matt's spoken about it as well, is that it's an imperfect game and bullets are flying live and it's going to be this, chaotic, everything's going on all at once. But one of the things that I think separates great teams from good teams is when you make a mistake, can somebody else lift you up and make it so that it's not a mistake? And I thought, again, the throw from Jordan's not far from egregious on the opening play, but again, it's not an A+ perfect ball. We've seen Green Bay struggle with those in the past, and Christian says, screw it, I'm going to go up and get it anyway. We're getting this big completion to start the game, and it sets the tone for the entire rest of the game. Later on in the game, Christian's the one that makes the mistake. He runs the wrong route, and Jaden's still the one running the slant. Love throws A+ perfect ball to Jaden, even with all the chaos going on, because Christian's there and brings another defender with him and threads a beautiful ball. And Jaden, still in a very tight contested space, comes up with it, even though it gets on him quickly, makes the catch, gets in for the touchdown. And sometimes things are going to go wrong, and the ability to kind of have somebody pick that up and say, you know what, I don't care what's gone wrong. I'm going to make sure that this mistake clears and we make a positive out of it anyway. That's been a major step, not only for the offense, but just kind of in general on this team as of late.
Yeah, and just one other quick note, they the way things are unfolding right now, where literally like that Lions game, all 5 of the active receivers, or I should say the receivers that saw action, like all of them had a play or two in that game. And that's kind of becoming the norm. So if you're a defense, like, yeah, you could maybe try to key in on Christian Watson just because he's Christian Watson, that size and speed. But right now there's 4 or 5 guys on any given play that Love could get the ball to. And that is just such an added stressor for defenses to have to contend with.
I can't wait to watch this weapon group continue to grow. I'm so excited. And we'll have all off season to go over like who the Packers should draft and what positions and things like that. And listen, they're going to be living in best player available land for a while over the course of the next couple of years. And if that happens to be a wide receiver, so be it. Take it and figure out the logistics of it later. But I have a lot of faith in the wide receiver group on this team. And I am in like no hurry if it's even and you've got a wide receiver tied with some other player on the board. Like I would probably take the player at almost any other position at this point, just because I think these wide receivers are going to put it together. I love the skill sets that each of them bring to the table. It's all a little bit different. And I think Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love have the different flavors at their disposal at wide receiver and tight end that they need. Now they just need to continue to progress. And we've seen these guys work their butts off already to get to the level that they're at right now. And it's only going to continue to get better. Let's stick on the offense with a couple other ones here. The first one is Jordan Love. And we obviously talked about him at the onset and really have been kind of weaving him in throughout the show so far. But I think one of the things that we kind of knew going into the season, and we certainly knew it after training camp, was that the middle of the field was going to be attacked far more often than it was in the later stages of Aaron's career. For better or worse, Aaron became pretty allergic to the middle of the field and throwing in that area, and just became so risk averse that throwing in that area of the field was just almost a no-go for him. And Jordan is not the same. And again, there's going to be some things that come along with that at times that are going to lead to some negative plays, but it's also led to a lot of positives. And that area being more open has led to, I think, some of the success that this offense is going through right now.
Yeah, just to put into perspective, I got this written down here. Over the last 4 games, he's completing 76% of his passes to the middle of the field from Pro Football Focus at 10.2 yards per attempt for 604 yards. Through the first 7 games, he had 652 total yards. So only about, 48 more yards with 3 extra games, 6.3 yards per attempt, and completing just 63% of his passes. Like, he's been lights out, fantastic, nearly unstoppable attack in the middle of the field. And like you said, we knew that was going to be a part of the offense. Our friend Dusty Evely, he did a fantastic article over the offseason at Packer Report, breaking down like the last 3-4 years of quarterback play in terms of targeting the middle of the field. And, you could look, and number 1 at the top of that list, not surprising, was Jimmy Garoppolo, the Kyle Shanahan offense over in San Francisco. And I can't remember if Rodgers was last out of like 60-something eligible quarterbacks, but he was very, very close to it. And not that any of us were charting Jordan Love's throws through OTAs, mini camp, but right away you could just see the emphasis in terms of the ball going to that part of the field. Like you said, the space has opened up, and as part of a product of just, again, the receivers catching on. A little bit more traction in the run game, helping out play action a little bit. But when you're attacking the middle of the field, you get guys the ball in space on the run, yards after the catch opportunities. And we've seen Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed in recent weeks be really, really good at finding those soft spots on those intermediate or even, deep shots over the middle. Specifically in the Chargers game comes to mind for me. So like you said, it's a big part of the Matt LaFleur offense, continued success in that area. It's obviously going to be beneficial for Love and the Packers offense as a whole, but he has not just been good attacking the middle these last 4 games. Like I said, he's been lights out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the evolution of that and how teams then try to shut down the middle of the field. Does that open up more of the outside passing game? Like, just going to be interesting to see, because teams are going to continue to throw things at Jordan Love until they figure out a plan that is his kryptonite at some point. And I'm sure, Steve Spagnuolo this week is going to be cooking up some things in a variety of different ways to throw at Jordan. But man, he's shown already that he has a lot of answers to a lot of the questions. I don't think that's going to change anytime in the near future, but all of that evolution of Jordan and how teams attack him is going to be really fun moving forward. One more on offense. It seems like the rotation at right guard is going to continue moving forward. John Runyon Jr., Sean Ryan, think a lot of people at this point are more on the Sean Ryan bandwagon of like, hey, it's time to make the change. I'm certainly in that camp. If I was going to play devil's advocate, I would say if you look at the play of Rasheed Walker, Yosh Nijman, John Runyon Jr., and Sean Ryan overall over the course of the past 3 games, I actually think you can make an argument that Nijman and Runyon have looked better comparative to where they were earlier in the season. Like Rasheed Walker's looked better and Sean Ryan's looked good. Like all 4 of them are actually playing a little bit better as of late than I think they were. And we didn't see Ryan before, so it's hard to compare it. So like maybe this competition thing is working a little bit. I think you and I talked about in the past of like, all right, if you want to do the competition thing, fine. But if one of them just starts being awesome, please stick with that one. But overall, it does seem like it's going to be something that continues.
Yeah, that's 100% the feeling that I get, whether it's LaFleur, Adam Stenovich, Luke Buckus on Monday. Like he said the exact same thing. And to your point, he said that since they've started doing this, the play of those 4 players has all been elevated from it. Like they, from what the Packers are seeing and what they're coaching, what they're grading their guys on from a film perspective, like they love that competition and feel that it's, even though we talk about continuity in the offensive line, that rotation that they're working with right now has bolstered the play of those 4. And then as a result of the entire unit. And Butkus went on to say, again, to your point about the hot hand, he goes, until someone emerges like way ahead of the person that they're competing with, this is what they're going to continue to do right now. So even, the play of Runyon or the play of Walker has stood out above the other 2 in comparison, but from the Packers perspective, not enough. What I did find interesting was, and obviously, as we know, I'll throw the caveat out there, those in the building know way more than us, all that good stuff. But what I did find was interesting was that Butkus said when talking about what Runyon has brought to the team, he kept talking in past tense about past years. He's helped us win a lot of games. He's helped provide stability at the position. And that just caught my attention a little bit because it was talking about what he's done previously as almost kind of carrying the water a little bit for why we don't want to necessarily just go straight with Sean Ryan at this point. And again, as we know, this Runyon's in the final year of his rookie deal. Whether he's back or not, we don't know. But, football is, the ultimate what have you done for me lately sport. Like, what are you contributing in the moment? So, again, I add the caveat, they know more than us, all that stuff. But I just found that comment interesting, to say the least.
I think it's interesting too. And like, I certainly don't think that it's wrong. I think I've been a huge Runyon supporter, especially again, 2 years ago. I said going into the season, I thought there was the potential in a contract year that he would get back to playing the way he was 2 years ago and maybe even elevating it from there. It's just unfortunate that it's gone in the opposite direction. It certainly cost him, I think, a lot of money this upcoming offseason. Hopefully he can turn it around. I'll say it every single time. Well, I think it's time to maybe go with a different player. I mean, it'd be great if he just all of a sudden started playing at a Pro Bowl level. Like, give me that instead. That sounds amazing. And like we've seen players all of a sudden, it clicks, it slows down, and it kind of gets back on track out of nowhere. So hopefully that's the case for Runyon. But again, as all the coaches are really, sort of, leaning towards at this point, it sounds like all of those rotations, at least at right guard and probably left tackle, are going to continue moving forward. Let's jump to the defensive side of the ball. Just a couple ones I wanted to go over with you. I think the first one is I don't know. It feels like maybe there was a thought at some point earlier this year, like that the demise of Kenny Clark was somewhat imminent and he was no longer a good player. And I think the PFF grades weren't great or things like that. To me, I really like what Kenny Clark's done all year long. Is he the same dominant player that he was like 4-ish years ago? No, I don't think that he is. Is he still really good and a plus player and a winning football player for this team? For me, absolutely. And I think at least it's starting to come along where I think people are starting to realize this is still a heck of a defensive tackle that Green Bay has.
Yeah, absolutely. We're recording this on November 28th, just 3 days away from December, Kenny Clark month, where the production just starts to take off. Or right around the corner, but he's gotten an early jump on it this year. I mean, like you said, we all know what Kenny Clark can do on his own, but the numbers from a pressures perspective, it shows that when he's at his best, so is this Packers whole defensive front. In the Packers I'm going to try to say this correctly. In the 4 games this season where the Packers have generated their most pressures in a game, Kenny Clark has led the team in pressures in 3 of those games. Over the last two, he's second among all interior defensive linemen in total pressures, first in pass rush win rate. Like last 2 weeks, Chargers and Lions games, he's been playing at a really, really high level, and that's benefiting everyone around him as the numbers reflect. He's, by Pro Football Focus numbers, he's taken more of his snaps away from the A gap this season than he has in the past several. And I felt like that's a conversation that had been, or a topic anyways, that had been out there for a number of years now. And now with TJ Slayton finally stepping into that larger role where he is that run stuffer on this defense, it's freed them up to a degree to have Clark playing away from the center, from the A-gap, a bit more than what he has previously. The hope with that is that you can get more one-on-one opportunities, but whether it's him just bullying his way into the backfield, the best way to destroy a play is through quick pressure up the middle, or whether it is him taking on a double team when he's playing at that level, when he's commanding that attention, when his presence is out there in that capacity, that benefits everyone around him. That benefits the interior defenders, the edge rushers, and obviously when you're getting pressure on the quarterback, that benefits those on the back end as well. So Kenny's playing at a really high level over these last 2 weeks, and not surprisingly, the Packers pass rush as a group, as a whole, has been really good as well.
I think I probably could have printed t-shirts at some point that the defense goes as Kenny Clark goes over the past 5-6 seasons, because definitely a phrase that's come out of my mouth quite a bit. And it's 1,000,000% true. When he is playing at his best, it is really tough for opposing offenses. And this defense usually rallies around that. And just when you have a guy that's pressing from the interior, makes everything easier for Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary. When Rashawn Gary wins quick around the edge, if there's not that interior pressure, quarterback steps up, has the time to get rid of the ball, hit his check down, whatever it might be. If Gary gets around the edge quick, or Preston or Bart, whoever it is, and Kenny Clark's, pushing that pocket up the middle, the quarterback just is in full panic mode, and it completely changes everything. And obviously from a run defense standpoint, when you get Kenny and you can just funnel everything to him inside and he's just eating worlds in there, that's the best of this Packers defense. He's playing really good football, and glad we got to talk about it a little bit because I think it's gone a little bit under the radar. The other one I wanted to ask you about is the semi-imminent return of Eric Stokes. I kind of feel like it's probably not going to happen this week, just the way that Matt LaFleur talked about it. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe he gets activated. It was interesting to me that when he did come back, it didn't seem like they had any defensive plan. Now, that's when Rasul was still on the roster. I'd have to think back if Jair was actually healthy in that game or not. I think he might have been, but yeah, I think so too. But either way, that was understandable because at the time you had Jair and Rasul and Eric wasn't going to play in the slot. So there wasn't really a spot for him on defense. Now we'll see if Jair is back at some point as well. I'm hoping he can be back this week. But if not, either if he's not or even if he is, it's going to be interesting to me where he slots in the Corey Ballantyne, Carrington Valentine, Jair Alexander, and Eric Stokes. I know he's not going to be above Jair, but the other ones are really interesting because he played a couple snaps of special teams, then had the injury on special teams and was right back on IR. What's your thought on how they kind of utilize him when he does come back?
That's a great question because Matt LaFleur was asked by Bill Huber how they approach his return this time around compared to last, so they don't necessarily run into the same injury issue again. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought early in the season there was a report that his potential return to practice during training camp was even set back at that time by another hamstring injury.
Totally
so
true.
This has happened twice already where he's had these setbacks from that type of injury. Don't know if it's this exact same or same leg. I don't know that, but a similar soft tissue injury he's dealt with on a few occasions that's pushed him back this year. So in terms of the timeline, we got 6 games left. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to play this week. They have a full 3 weeks to get him up to full speed before having to put him back on the 53-man roster. So at most, it feels like he would have 5 games, potentially even 4 available. And I'm guessing they're going to take a similar approach because he never fully got back into it. He hasn't really played since week 9 of last season. So maybe there's a game or 2 on special teams to kind of ramp back up. If things extend, we're down to 2 games left in the regular season, not knowing what the playoffs hold at that point before, again, just guessing and based on previous timelines, when he could be back on the field defensively in a full capacity. And I think at that point, I think you have to find a way to work him back in to just kind of get him those reps and not go a full season without seeing some defensive snaps. But I think what they're going to do, That's a great question. But what I think they got to do is, I think you got to have him jump Carrington Valentine at that time just to get him back on the field. And he's going into 2024, final year of, or I guess they'll have the fifth year option, but final year of the 4-year rookie deal. Like, and right now in terms of what they have in Eric Stokes, it's a question mark. I mean, a really good rookie season, second season, obviously suffered the injury, but wasn't going great up to that point. This one has been out this whole time. Like, we've seen a lot of good. We've seen some not so good. Like, the jury's still kind of out to a degree. And I think if you have the opportunity, you got to see what you have in him and start building his way back, and then see hopefully that he can, through a good offseason, hit the ground running for you in 2024.
I think one of the really interesting aspects of the remainder of this season is the fact that they are now competing for a playoff spot, like legitimately. Like, it is not out of the question. At least, maybe with a couple weeks left, maybe something goes wrong and they're out of it. Or I don't think that's going to be the case by any means. So you could be going into those last couple games not just playing with house money, not being like, all right, let's get Stokes out there, let's get some rookies out there, let's see what they can do so we can make some evaluations for next year. It's going to be, hey, if we beat Minnesota and we beat Chicago, we're going to get in the playoffs. And I think that changes the calculus a little bit of like, all right, yeah, it would probably be great to get Eric Stokes out there, but like, if you're not sure going into that game that he's like ready to play 60 snaps or whatever, and like you just feel like Carrington Valentine or Corey Ballantyne are giving you the better opportunity to win, like that changes things up quite a bit too. So I'm really, really intrigued just to see how this plays out. I kind of feel like they're going to ramp him up on special teams, and then it could be like he might need something like an injury or something ahead of him to get back on the field, which seems crazy to think of. If you go back to his rookie year and the way that he was playing as a rookie, like this was like, oh, they've got Jair and Eric Stokes outside corners long-term. This is going to be amazing. And it just has not come to fruition. And I don't know how it's going to go. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Let's jump over to special teams, and we'll go over Packers Chiefs really quick. Only one on special teams that I wanted to ask you about. I know you talked about a little bit as well, but rookie kicker, and one of the really hard words with any sort of rookie, but certainly on the kicking standpoint, is patience. But it seems like Green Bay is very much set still on being patient with their rookie kicker.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Brian Gutekunst set the course for us back in June with what their plan was with Anders Carlson, and the start of the season was fantastic. I think he was 5 weeks in without a miss on either an extra point or a field goal opportunity. And since then, I believe he's missed an extra point in the last 3 games. One of them was blocked, but he's missed a field goal attempt in 4 of the last 6. And for a team that up until recently has struggled to move the ball, put points on the board, like we saw it in that Steelers game, even 1 point can be absolutely crucial for this Packers team where the margin of error has been so small. Rich Bisaccia talking about Anders Carlson. Not that Bisaccia would ever, provide any sort of, insight, but sounds like very little concern, should I say, in terms of what they've seen from him. There's, I think he mentioned his, in terms of the contact, obviously little nuances to continue working on, as is the case with any rookie, but they were fully prepared for this. And one thing that always stuck with me, because Bisaccia brought it up multiple times throughout the summer and even into the season, was when talking about Carlson, and one of the reasons why they drafted him was his mental makeup. And we saw that throughout the summer. Like, he would go 1 for 6 in one practice and unfazed almost, the next one goes 6 for 6. And I think again, we knew there were going to be ups and downs, but I think the promising aspect of this is even within a single game, one of those misses hasn't compounded. He's bounced back each time and put the next kick through the upright. So again, like you said, just something that was expected, patience is required, and just something that they're working through right now.
Yeah, not always easy at kicker, but it's the right approach. And I'm hoping he's going to get back on one of those hot streaks any moment, and hopefully can kind of carry him through the remainder of this season. All right, let's talk some Packers Chiefs. Man, if you would have told me going into this game a few weeks ago that I would actually be like, this is an interesting game. Like, I'm excited to watch this one. I'm not sure I would have believed you, but Chiefs, at least last I checked, are 6-point favorites. Definitely still the odds-on favorites to go into Lambeau and win this game. I don't think that's going to be a shock or surprise to anyone. Still think Green Bay's playing with a little bit of house money here, but Kansas City, not quite the juggernaut that maybe they've been in the past, and Green Bay, not quite the pushover that they were a few weeks ago. So very much more interesting game, and I'm really excited for this one. What are you kind of looking at in this one for Packers Chiefs?
Big thing for me is how the Packers handle the blitz. This is a Chiefs team that wants to get after the quarterback. They'll send additional rushers from a variety of different positions to do so. That game a few years ago, Love's first start at Arrowhead, like that, they didn't cook that up. Maybe a little bit more aggressive, but for the most part, like that's who this Chiefs team is to a degree. And so, one, how does the Packers offensive line handle that? It's not a coincidence that the pass protection's been better in recent weeks, and so has Jordan Love. How does Jordan Love handle it? Two things from Monday. Matt LaFleur talked about how much improved Love's just pocket feel is, and he said that's, as we know, it's not something you can really coach. Players either have it or they don't, and if they don't have it, they got to experience it, gain that feel along the way. And so he talked about that being a key aspect in terms of Love's development. And then quarterbacks coach Tom Clements, when asked, all right, what have you been most encouraged by? Where's Jordan made the biggest jump over this last month? He said his decision making, specifically when to dump the ball off. And he said, looking at that Lions game, like from an execution standpoint, in terms of when to push the ball, when just to take what's available, he said that was the, one of the best parts of Love's performance was taking those dump offs, knowing I shouldn't push it into this window, or feeling the pressure and knowing where your outlet is. Like, so those are two key areas where he's improved in. And again, going against this Chiefs team that wants to blitz, wants to get after the quarterback, those are going to be two really key elements to the Packers' success on offense, of course, along with the blocking of the offensive line, the tight ends, the running backs hanging in there for pass protection. So obviously without time in the pocket, most often things are not going to end well for an offense, especially a young one. So for me, that's where a lot of this game starts and ends. How do the Packers handle that Chiefs pressure?
It's going to be so fun, and it's just another one of those tests for Jordan Love. We all know the backstory. To me, like that, it may come down to that. I also think there might be a little cat and mouse of like the Spagnuolo show blitz and then like pull everyone back. And I'm so excited. Like this matchup has me, totally geeked out. And at Lambeau Field, Sunday Night Football, Jordan playing at a totally different level than he was previously. Couldn't be more excited. Paul, awesome stuff as always. Any final thoughts on anything Packers related or anything in the world that you'd like to talk about before we get out of here?
No, I think we covered all the big stuff. Always happy to join you, Andy.
Appreciate it. Cheap plug really quick. I'm going to be doing a live Q&A / meet and greets at Badger State Brewery this coming Saturday at 7 p.m. Central Time. So if anyone wants to come out, hang out, have a beer, talk some Packers, talk some football, watch some Big Ten championship game, make sure to come out. Badger State Brewing, 7 p.m. this Sunday. Can't wait to see you guys there. Paul, thank you as always. You can follow him at Paul_Bretl and find him over at the Packers Wire. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. Follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. For Paul Bretl, I'm Andy. Until next time. And as always, go Pack Go.